Welcome everyone back to another episode of our podcast that we just started. All right, if you've seen the first one, thank you for following up with the second one. We've now decided to give a name for this podcast. It will be now called SBYMcast. I'm your host Brian today, and right next to me I have Anton Nguyen. He's someone who I do consider is my mentor. He graduated from our day. Rock and roll baby, by the way. Went to OCC to then later transferred to UCLA. Later on, he went to Thomas Jefferson for grad school and is now on rotations back in California to become an OT. Anton Nguyen, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Hey.
Very excited to be here and happy to contribute to this new up-and-coming podcast by SBYMcast.
Is this your first ever podcast, by the way?
To do one? Being interviewed. Being interviewed, yes.
I see. Well, as you can tell, this is still very new for everyone. This is definitely a territory that we never thought about going to until recently. And just to kind of go over everything that's going on from this point on, is we did mention last episode that we will be posting every week. We're going to be changing that now due to some circumstances and we'll be posting every other week. Hopefully we can do this consistently to the point where we can always generate this type of content from this point on. And just to start off the podcast, like I said, I kind of brought up the fact that you went to Mater Dei. To be honest, not that many people around our area kind of go to Mater Dei. Can you just kind of go over your experience at Mater Dei?
I don't know. It's hard to compare it to another high school experience because I've never attended another high school. But I do remember a lot of detentions for being late and for my hair being too long. And there were a lot of rules, and I wasn't sure if it was like the typical high school experience. But I remember a lot of rules. And high school was a long time ago for me, and
yeah, he's pretty old if you guys didn't know.
A little.
But just kind of going back on like rules and everything, you did go to St. Barbara too, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Did you not feel like the rules were the same?
They weren't as strict. Well, maybe because I wasn't as stubborn. Sometimes when you're in high school, I just think that you want to break the rules to show that you're your own person or that you're trying to not be contained by something. Mm-hmm. But then when you're in middle school and when you're younger, it seems like you want to be a rule follower so that you can please people. But then when you care less and less about pleasing people and then forming your own identity or asserting your own place in the world, breaking rules seems to be a part of that process.
I actually kind of see that interesting, to be honest, because my personal experience also going to St. Barbara and then going to Mater Dei after, I feel like Mater Dei was just so much more lenient, like in the sense of like it wasn't that, I mean, there were some strict rules obviously, but I didn't see it as a lot stricter compared to St. Barbara. That's just me though. But just to kind of move forward, you did bring up that you went to OCC and decided to transfer to UCLA. Did that have any fact going to OCC? Did you know beforehand, or like why did you end up going to OCC? Because everyone has different reasons for going.
This might be one of the more unusual paths. There is mostly financial. I didn't understand or know about financial aid growing up, and so when discussing like college plans with my parents, we just thought it'd be easier if I went to OCC and then transfer in afterward. And it was mostly a financial reason behind going to OCC, because I wanted to attend UCLA initially for music. I was heavily involved in the music program at Mater Dei, and that was the path that I wanted to be on. But then once I started thinking about my college plans, things changed a little bit, so that you try to lessen the burden on your parents. You try to lessen the financial load. But then, of course, this was before I knew anything about financial aid. So the lack of access to information had an effect on my college experience. I mean, nothing wrong with it. Like, it made me who I am today. But I think life for myself would look very different if I knew about that.
Did you not know, like, you could get financial aid during college or just in general? Because just in general, I know for me, I personally did get financial aid, and I got a lot of help. So I am really grateful for that. Do you know now if you got any financial aid back then? Because I don't know.
You mean like
in high school at Mater Dei?
I did at Mater Dei and at St. Barbara, but I didn't know how those rules affected college. Because it seems like when you attend college, you're more on your own, and it's more adult. Like, you're making more decisions for yourself. I mean, I understand like some parents try to get involved, but at the end of the day, it's more for you. And I think just not knowing a lot of what was going on, along with the stress and the pressure of choosing a college or even deciding to go, and then considering other options like trade schools or not going to college, I think that pressure and that stress really played a role in my decision making.
Choosing to go to OCC, when did you kind of decide, or like did you determine this like coming to your junior year, senior year? Like, when was that point actually?
It was about like midway through my junior year.
And then
talking about the future, like around your junior year is the time to talk about it. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about taking these classes, taking AP classes, or studying for the SATs, and in preparation for college. That's when I had the tough talk with my parents about like, all right, what can we do next, or what should we do next? And once we decided and agreed on a path, then I was like, all right. So that's the route that we're going to take, and so be it.
Did it affect you as a student personally?
Oh yeah, 100%. I stopped caring. I was never the best student. I'm still not the best student. And then when you're already not top tier student, and I mean, like, it's not like I failed out of school, but I wasn't as, how do you say it? As
determined or motivated,
or as invested in my academics as I could have been.
Just having that mentality about school, or not assuming, I guess the better question is, did it affect you personally? Like, did you not care about life in general at that point too? Or like...
No, I cared more about life at that time, because with the academic stress unloaded, like I knew where I was going, and I didn't have to worry about getting into community college. So with that stress gone, I was able to focus more on my... They call it extracurriculars, but then they became like the highlight of my life. Like I was able to invest more of my time into wrestling, and I was able to invest into theater, into musicals, into my music playing. I was able to do... I think I was very fortunate to enjoy the arts and the athletics without the burden of academics.
Well, why would you say they were like the highlights of your life?
It was fun, because I got to do things that I cared about. I got to do things that I wanted to do, and there's something special about growing and learning and polishing your skill set, whatever that may be. For athletics in wrestling, when you're able to learn a move and to successfully do it, or in music, when you learn the part correctly and able to perform it, or in theater, when you memorize a line or you perform in front of an audience, to know that the work that you put in was able to translate into your performance, and to know that I was afforded that time and that opportunity because I was less academically motivated. It's I don't take it for granted, and that's not to say that you shouldn't do well in school, because if you have that capacity, then by all means, because there are definitely moments in life where I was like, man, I wish I knew a little bit more about physics. I wish I knew a little bit more about chemistry or bio. I wish I knew a little bit more about grammar and stuff. But this is the life that I've lived, and I can't. I mean, I love my life now, and this is who I am, this is what I become, and then I acknowledge that this is how I came to be. So
no regrets or anything.
No,
because I feel like especially with high schoolers nowadays is when they're kind of at that point where they need to decide between one thing or the other. And it's happened to me too personally, as you know. They have something that they want to pursue, but they're going to have that fear of regret, and I feel like personally that's something that everyone goes through in life. Any reasons why you don't regret, or just about the topic of regret in general? What do you have to say towards our viewers?
On the idea of regret, it's the possibility or the impact of regret can be lessened if, like, when you're making decisions, you think about your decision-making skills, your decision-making abilities, you think about why you're doing what you're doing and how you're going to do what you're doing, then it lessens the potential of regret, you know. And sometimes people say, like, YOLO or you only live once and all that stuff. But honestly, if you have learned something and then you found meaning, or there's like good that came out of any experience, then you love yourself now, or you like the person that you're becoming, then the idea of regret is not as impactful. I mean, of course there are things that I've done in life that I regret, but then for the most part, I think I try to be a little bit more thoughtful in the decisions that I make and what I do, or where I do, when I do, who I do things with. It's just I think it through, and then I try to make the best decision that I can, and then continue to move forward. Because if you live in regret, that's just adding to the recipe of sadness and the blues, and it's like, why did I do this? Why did I do that? Well, we all know why you did that. Like, you know why you did that. And it's just like in life, when you continue to move forward, just pick yourself up, look at the decision that went into that, and if you don't approve of it, you can learn from it. And if you do approve it, do more of it. And I think that's my take on it.
One more thing I kind of wanted to bring up before we kind of move on towards your college stay, or that time during college, was I guess your faith. How was your faith during that time
in high school?
In high school.
I think in high school was when I first started learning about other religions. Growing up, you hear, like, in the commandments, like, thou shalt not have another god before me. It's like, what other god is there? You know, you don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you hear about Zeus and Aphrodite, like all like this Greek stuff because of like Hercules, the movie and whatnot. But you don't really hear about Krishna. You don't hear about Allah, Yahweh, or you don't hear about, I don't know, Asian gods or what have you, because you're just not exposed to that stuff. So when I was in high school, the idea of another god was introduced to me from a mentor when I was a sophomore or freshman, I can't remember. But he was like, Anton, do you want to go to a temple? And I was like, sure. I mean, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Mm-hmm. And he took me to a Hindu temple, and it was the first time I'd ever been exposed to anything like this. So I was blown away. I was like, I didn't even know it was another religion. I just thought it was just like another place to hang out, place to do things, or I don't know, like another community. And I'm learning about all these things while I had no idea that this was another religion. You know, because this concept was just so foreign to me at the time. And I received a book, and I was like, oh, so this is what it is. And then it was like our Bible, except it was the Hindu text. I forgot what it was called. Bhagavad Gita or something. And I opened it and I read it. It's just a bunch of stories, right? And it made me reflect on, like, if a stranger, if someone who didn't know about Christianity or Catholicism opened up our Bible, what would they read? They would just read a bunch of stories too. You know, they're going to find stories, they're going to find passages that resonate with them. And there's certain things about the Hindu text where I was like, this makes sense to me, you know? And in terms of faith, I think it opened my eyes to other representations of the same truth. You know, there's still like the core truths, the elements of most religions, I think, is to be kind to one another And then from there, that's when things get different. But at modern day was when I was first introduced to other religions through a mentor, through the curriculum, however, and through the actual religious experiences from school. I feel like there are classes that were trying to teach you about like Catholic life. Like there was a course called Christian Lifestyle.
I remember that.
Of course, I got married to the homecoming queen. That was pretty gnarly. And then we raised a baby together, and we basically had like an egg that we walked around with for like a semester, and then we figured out the finances and how you wanted to raise a child, and that was a really interesting experience.
I'm really glad you brought up Christian lifestyles. Just because that's something unique about Mardi on its own. That's not really something you even learn in like confirmation or anything, because you're still fairly young. You learned this as a senior, correct? Christian lifestyle.
Junior, senior,
I'm pretty sure it was senior year. Yes, it was senior year. Just kind of going through the whole Christian lifestyles class, because it was it a half semester or was it a semester? Yeah, it was one semester for you guys too. Did it bring any new perspective to you about our faith or anything?
I'm pretty sure it could have if I was a better student. But in terms of the workload, I just found out that kids are expensive. Raising a baby is challenging. And then the questions that they ask you when you're raising a child, it makes you think. It makes you think that when you're raising a child. Shoot, where was I going with this? When you're raising a child, it makes you think like how challenging it is to raise a child, especially in the first year.
I see. Just kind of moving on. So I think that was just one of the main questions that I do want to ask every guest of the 3 phases in life, especially in terms of education during high school, college, and post-college. So you being one of our first actual guests and going over the fact that you were able to learn other religions and stuff. Did that put a factor in anything once you hit into college?
What do you mean?
Like now that high school is over and you kind of just by what you're explaining, it just seems like you're kind of just still going through the motions of the Catholicism and just our faith and everything. Did your faith change even more after going to college? Because getting that freedom of just learning, getting that freedom of doing whatever you want and less restriction on you because you're a little bit older, and especially even whether you have a strict parent or not, you're essentially, once you're in college, you do have more freedom. Does that freedom gauge anything for you as a person and other faiths, or even your own faith?
I think when answering the question about freedom, I think it's important that we do exercise our freedom to learn and to explore, because it's kind of like the analogy that I want to see is if you want to be loyal to Orange County, let's say, and you only lived in Orange County your whole life, all you know was Orange County. If you have nothing to compare it to, then how do you know where it actually stands within the world, right? And then for someone like myself, since I've lived in LA, I lived in Philly, and I lived in Saigon, like to be able to experience the other aspects of the world, and say, oh, this is where Orange County stands, or this is where Vietnam stands, then you have a better sense of where things fit. When it comes to faith, for me at the time, I was just very curious about learning how other religions express themselves and how other faiths express themselves. I was just very hungry for knowledge, and I was very I just wanted to learn as much as I could, whether it was religion or faith. And especially when you're in college, it's more along the lines of this is an opportunity to learn. I could have delved deeper into Catholicism. I touched on it a little bit and I read a few things, but in terms of my religious experiences, I 100% explored others in the sense of like obtaining knowledge and learning about them and exploring them and seeing what is important to them. Because when you study Christianity, when you study Catholicism, this is what you're given, but then you don't see how it fits or you don't see how it compares to other faiths, because other faiths have like their own value. And then I think it's important to recognize that Catholicism is a treasure to the world.
Mm-hmm. One thing that you've brought up to me prior to this podcast is Buddhism. That's something that I still see to this day that you still kind of practice in a way. Can you go a little bit more into that? When did you start getting more into Buddhism? I guess I would say.
Interesting story. So it was my first day of college at OCC, and it was my friend's, I think, first semester, and he was taking comparative religions. I think that's what it's called, religion, something like that. And he's like, Anton, I think you should take this class. You study religions, I know you're into it, but then at the end of the semester, you can either write an essay or go to a Buddhist retreat. And then he chose the Buddhist retreat because that's how much he hated writing essays. So he attended a 4-day, 5-day retreat in place of writing an essay, and I thought, I should give that a shot too. And I did that, and then opened my eyes to the potential and the possibility of what Buddhism is or can be. Because Buddhism it's not exactly a religion, it's a way of life, and it's a philosophy, because they don't worship anything. There's no central ceremony, there's no rituals. I mean, there are, but it's not as broad as, let's say, the Catholic Mass or the Catholic Communion. For them, there are very specific practices and then very specific actions that you can take to achieve enlightenment. And then for them, enlightenment kind of can be comparable to our heaven, but that's a whole nother topic.
Definitely, for sure. Being introduced into Buddhism during that time as a freshman or sophomore in college, did you feel at any time where you wanted to be more involved around the Buddhist community, or like just the religion in general, or did you still, at the end of the day, still stick with what you knew, Catholicism and everything, and your reasons why?
I never really wanted to get involved in the Buddhist community because I didn't have any ties. So the retreat I went on is at Deer Park Monastery, and they're very open to people of all faiths. And then one of the things they taught was like this: we're not trying to convert you. If anything, they believe that their practice will enhance your own faith. And at the time, I didn't believe that because I wasn't. I mean, I was still involved in the church, but I wasn't like, yes, Catholicism. I was gung ho about it. I just didn't understand it. I got tired of the rituals and the ceremonies and all the extra stuff. I didn't understand at the time, when I was 18, 19, like at the heart of Catholicism, what it was all about. But to answer your question, I didn't want to get involved in the Buddhist community because I didn't have any personal tie-ins. When I was there, it was more like monks and nuns and other people who were interested, but I didn't know anyone in the Buddhist community. And then here, I was still involved in Tiongyi, and I was more of community involvement, and then just being there for my friends and my loved ones. And that's where I get that's the community that I consider myself a part of.
I see. When was that? Because you got introduced to it, and you start to learn a little bit more about everything in terms of that Buddhism side and going to Deer Park and everything. When was there ever a point in time where you started practicing some of their religious practices?
At Deer Park, they practice Zen Buddhism, which is the most non-religious form of Buddhism.
And that's the type Zen.
It's I won't say founded, but like the leading person right now is Thich Nhat Hanh, who's also a Vietnamese monk. Mm-hmm. And he also escaped during the war, and he spent time with Martin Luther King mm-hmm. In promoting peaceful protest mm-hmm. and the like. Mm-hmm. The practices I think you're asking about is mostly mindfulness, because that's at the very root and the very core of Zen Buddhism, is to be aware mm-hmm. and then to live in the moment. And then for the students who you think about some of the retreats that they've had here, it's how often do you say be here now? Right? Mm-hmm. That was actually a theme for one of the retreats that I attended. It's like you be, and that's like your very being, right? Here, physically, you're in this space, and now, as in this time, this is where you're at. So to acknowledge where you are physically, mentally, spiritually in this moment, it brings a different element of existence where you don't worry about the past, you don't worry about the future. And if you're fully present physically and in the time, like here in the here and now, you can be more in tune with the people around you. You can be more in tune with your environment. And then when you're able to be present like that, you can bring more happiness within, and you bring more happiness to others. Because, one example is, like, don't you just hate it when someone is when you're talking to someone and then someone's on their phone? Obviously they're not paying as much attention, right? But then if they're in the here and the now and they're paying attention to you, and then you can see all their facial features, all their reactions, and you note something, mm-hmm. you pay attention to them, they feel like you care. And that type of genuine care circulates. It's back and forth. And then sometimes, you're not going to get everybody, but then people are going to respond to it. Mm-hmm. Right? Bill Clinton was known as like one of the most charming presidents, and he's considered charming because he makes that person feel important, or he makes that person feel like they're the only person in the room. Mm-hmm. But then that coincides with being present, right? You can't make someone feel special if you're not in the here and now with that person. Mm.
And did you feel like you were starting to practice more of the Zen stuff right away after that first experience of going to Deer Park and everything?
Oh, 100%.
100%.
Once this is with anything, I think, when you have a retreat or when you get involved in something at this level, imagine if you, I'm sure a lot of our audience has attended summer camps or band camps, sports camps, by day 4, day 5, you're just like, oh yeah, I'm all about this. I'm all about that because that's all you did. Mm-hmm. You breathe, ate, slept, music, football, basketball, track, 24/7, mm-hmm. 24/5, what have you. And for myself in that initial experience, when I learned the basics of mindfulness meditation, I learned the basics of being present, and I learned the basics of loving kindness, or deep listening, those are the concepts that have stuck with me, because when you're in an environment of like 200 plus other people, mm-hmm. learning the same thing that you're learning, doing the same thing that you're doing, caring, being as invested about the same things, you can't help but like carry it over into the rest of your life and into your normal life.
I think you kind of, just ending off with that, you kind of bring up a good point where the people that you surround yourself with are really essentially the representation of who you are as a person. When just kind of going back to like when you're doing something for so long and everything, and just around these group of people who already have that one goal that you have too, that's what creates that beauty of that environment right there. Mm-hmm. Thank you for touching that up. Let's try to fast forward a little bit into the big part, which I think is you after going to OCC, you transferred over to UCLA. What was your major that you graduated? Psychology. Okay, and then after that, you decided to go to Vietnam. How brief was that moment from, or not brief? after you graduated, how long did it take till you decided to go to Vietnam, and why did you go to Vietnam?
Oh, I decided to go before I graduated.
Before you graduated?
This was about the time when I was dating someone and we broke up, and I was like, because when you're about to, when you graduate from high school, you're like, oh, what's next? When you move on from 8th grade, oh, what's next? For myself, when you graduate from college, you think, what's next? Sometimes people start working. Sometimes people go on to postgraduate where they prepare for the master's program. For myself, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan. I thought I had a plan, but when you're with someone and then you break up with them, plans fall through. And I remember it's about March or April when I bought my plane ticket. It was, in essence, I had no obligations, no job lined up, no girlfriend, no family to worry about or to take care of, no responsibilities at home that was pressing because I was living away from home. And so I figured if there was ever an opportunity for an extended stay in another country, then this would be it. And that was the thought process that led me to live in Vietnam.
How long did you live in Vietnam for, and how was your experience like?
I think it was 8 or 9 months.
8 or 9 months.
I left in June and I came back in February. It was eye-opening, people think about what it means to be a Vietnamese American, but sometimes people forget what it means to be a Vietnamese.
I definitely agree with you on that.
It's a different perspective, living here and then living over there. Because sometimes you make fun. I make fun of my cousins, right?
Yeah.
They're over there, they come over here, and then we tease about their English and stuff. But then I go over there, and then they make fun of my Vietnamese, but that's superficial stuff. But in terms of deeper things, in terms of lifestyle and then perspective on life, in Vietnam, even in Saigon, which is considered the New York of Vietnam, even in Saigon, they're a lot more relaxed. They take, I think the Latin community calls it a siesta. After lunch, everyone takes a break for an hour and a half or 2 before they start work again. So when they told me that to come back from work at 2 o'clock, I think, or 1:30, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? They said, go take a nap. I was like, why would I take a nap? The administrator was like, why wouldn't you take a nap? Because as a culture, as a community, everyone is expected to take a break, a midday break. And that's just one of the small lifestyle differences that you can see when you're coming from a different culture.
Obviously, being in Vietnam is, you already brought up, the culture, lifestyle is already different. Did you practice any faith in Vietnam or anything, or were you just kind of going with the flow? Because I know there was something that you didn't touch up, but at least going to Vietnam, you weren't there just for no reason. You were there to also be an English teacher and everything too. Even though you were a teacher and everything, during your free time, was there anything faith related that you did, or how was your faith in Vietnam?
In terms of Catholicism and Christianity, it was I would go to church with my aunts and uncles when I visited them in the villages. When I was in Saigon, I didn't think too much about it. There was just too much to experience, too much to learn, and too much to grow. And the people that I spent my time with weren't. I'm not saying they're unholy, but it's not their biggest priority was to go to church or to go to mass. When I was in Saigon, I spent my time learning the language. I spent my time with the locals and the people and my fellow teachers to learn about what it means to be Vietnamese and what the differences are between our culture and theirs. And that was my time in Vietnam. But then I think it was December or January, where I left Vietnam to go travel in the other Southeast Asian countries. Because if you look on the map, it makes a pretty beautiful loop. From Saigon, it's Cambodia, and then Thailand, Laos, and then Hanoi, and you make your way down. It's you can make a trip, a circular trip throughout Southeast Asia. And I remember there was a Buddhist monk in Thailand that I wanted to visit. And I did a silent retreat there, and it was a different experience than what I had in Deer Park, because kind of like Christianity, it's not not every Christian denomination is going to give you the same Christian experience. So to experience a different form of Buddhism, a little more religious based one in Thailand was an experience, was something to for lack of a better word, experience itself.
It just at this point in your life, it just seems as if you're not really picking any religion per se as to fully practice. But one thing that I am starting to realize is that you're very spiritual in the practices that you do. Can you kind of go a little bit more into that sense? Because that's definitely something that not many people get really into.
In the sense spirituality, I think, is one of the most unacknowledged aspects of life in Western society. You're always spiritual. It's either you're more or you're less, right? To be less spiritual would be to be more earthly, right? To go after sensual pleasures such as food or video gaming or gambling or money, right? Those are more earthly desires and cravings. And then you have spiritual cravings along the lines of community, being kind, and then elevating one another or elevating yourself. Those are more spiritual practices. I think when it comes to religion, that's a mode, like a way for people to experience that spirituality. But I myself wouldn't say I'm the most religious person. We can talk religion if you like, but I'd rather talk spirituality. I'd rather get into the depths and the content and the ways of elevating yourself and the people around you in manners that are translatable and for everyone to understand.
I see. Sorry, give me 1 second. After the Vietnam trip, you said you came back in February. Just kind of switching, going from being in America and that lifestyle to being 8 to 9 months in Vietnam to now going back to America. How has your perspective changed about life in general and just coming back to the U.S.?
Oh, I remember the culture, the reverse culture shock very vividly. There in Saigon especially, there's a certain chaos to things, but then if you understand it, if you lived in it long enough, you can see despite the chaos, there's a pattern to it, right? There's a certain sense, you can figure it out, you understand why people are doing things or the flow of things. And when you come back to the States, you start to see that it's more structured. But then there's a lot more nonsense, right?
What do you mean by nonsense? Can you kind of go more into that?
There's more. In Vietnam, they will. If you are fat or ugly, you will be called fat or ugly. In America, if you're fat or ugly, you would be there's more political correctness. I'm not saying it's wrong, but then in Asia it's a little bit more direct. But back to the reverse culture shock, after experiencing Vietnam and Saigon, and then the villages outside, the lifestyle here is very fast comparatively. One of the more key moments of experience was I was out with my uncles and we were getting coffee and I was getting restless. And I pulled out my phone. He's like, "Why are you pulling out your phone?"
And this is in Vietnam.
Outside the villages, one of my uncles. And I was like, "I'm bored." And he was like, "The conversation just got started. We're simmering. Why don't we just wait till we boil? We're not gonna hop into an exciting, interesting, lively talk right away. You have to sit this through." And it just made me consider in the West, it's very okay, if you don't grab your attention right away, it's gone. And then the West can't tolerate boredom. They see boredom as if it's something that's negative or something that's bad, when in reality, some of the greatest discoveries and achievements come when you're bored. Especially with the coronavirus and the shelter in place that we have right now, this is an opportunity to be creative, you know, and understand that people are restless and it can be hard, but if you just sit still and let your mind wander, I'm pretty sure everyone here can discover something or create something or make something that can be of value, whether it's music or the arts or coming up with a podcast idea, you know, anything of that sort.
Kind of going back to also that reverse culture shock that you had, is there anything that you wish that us as a community can kind of adopt after experiencing a different lifestyle outside of what we're used to?
Oh yeah, like I think Americans in the West are very caught up in being productive, and sometimes I ask like to produce what, right? Like you want to get good grades, which is fine, or you want to make a lot of this or make a lot of that, but for what? Right? I think what the West can learn from the East is like do things that are more meaningful. Like do things that are actually important to you. Because productivity, that could be like a superficial thing to hide an anxiety or to hide something that you're insecure about, right? Like have you ever met someone that was free and then he did things how they wanted, like he or she wanted, like a creative person or someone who was able to invest their heart and soul into something and then to make it as best as they can. And I think that's way more intriguing than someone who can, I don't know, work 60 hours a week and then come home dead, you know?
Yeah.
Feeling not alive. I think when you spend time with people who do things that they really want to do or do things that they're enjoying, I mean, I think there's a difference that needs to be acknowledged between productivity and creativity. And then if the West, with all the resources that we have, if we can be more creative as a country, as a nation, you know, I think the world can look a little differently.
I totally agree with what you're saying. I think honestly, me personally going to Vietnam several times, not in a long duration like you had, like 8-9 months, but I've gone to Vietnam 4 or 5 times. One thing that I've seen is the biggest difference between the East and the West is something that you actually touched on, was community. Since the West lifestyle is so fast and all we want to do is just to be productive, we kind of lose the sense of ourselves and the things that are going kind of around us.
Yeah. We definitely lose sight of the humanity of others. Like if let's say you're at a restaurant, I mean, this is not going to happen now, but let's say you were at a restaurant and somebody brought out something that you didn't like on a scale of like you're starving to like, I don't know, you're a prince, it seems like most mistakes that restaurant chefs or cooks make are very negligible. And the West is very privileged in the sense like, oh, he didn't make it to the exact temperature, or like, oh, this is like medium rare instead of medium. It's like, all right, I mean, it's just a few like degrees warmer or cooler or whatever, but there's a lot of privilege here. And I think the West forgets the humanity in another person. Like, just think about your day, right? When you hang out with people, when you go to a group of, I don't know, let's say your basketball teammates, who amongst your teammates actually acknowledges every single person in that room? Right? Like those type of experiences aren't as common. But then, I don't know, like with my boys, everyone gets acknowledged. Right? I'm not saying like my boys are like the best people on earth. They're up there. But it's important to recognize people and then for what they contribute or what they are. And how often do people ask, oh, how are you doing? And mean it. Right? In Vietnam, you're not one person is going to ask everybody how they're doing because you're expecting a story in return. Right? Yes. And it's fine. It's okay. But like in the West, you don't get that very often. And then if you
don't get what, like kind of like someone going on and like saying a story in a way, or caring. I
mean, you do. Like you're gonna have like 1 or 2 friends that care. But by and large, like there are a few larger communities where everyone seems to be, not a knock on the Western culture, because we do have our own values, but comparatively there's not as much affection, there's not as much warmth, because it seems that the status quo or the numbers or productivity, what have you, seems to be more important than the community or the humanity behind things. And then if you are fortunate enough to find that community where everyone acknowledges each other, everyone builds each other up, then, hang on to them, because it's a rare thing and it's a beautiful thing. And then as time goes by, you're going to look back and then see that those are the more important things in life.
Also, going back to now that you're back from Vietnam, did anything change in terms of your perspective on life? I know we kind of touched on it, but more in the sense of is there anything that you try to really promote after coming back from traveling? Because it's like when you think of it, when you go travel, you get to experience these certain things. Especially for me on my end, for example, I feel more of that humanity. I don't take things as granted as much as I used to once I come back from a different country in the U.S. So once I come back, I really try to be, more thankful for the things that are around me and everything. Is there anything that you try to really instill onto people in terms of like message?
From Vietnam specifically, I don't know. I'm sure the lessons that I've learned will manifest itself in one way or another. It's going to come out somehow, some way. But I do find myself leading a slower life, just because I was able to really enjoy the slower pace of of the villages in Vietnam, at least. But specific to Vietnam, I don't know, man.
If you don't have anything, that's totally fine too. Just something that I wanted to kind of ask and kind of bring up. Just moving on forward, after, crazy enough that we're already so far into this, but at this time, this is now, what year is it again? 2014? That's when you just came back from Vietnam.
Came back in 2014.
Yes, and that's when I actually first met you.
Oh yeah?
So it's been
6 years.
6 years. So a little bit on my side, kind of coming. I didn't go to Singapore my whole life in terms of Thu Nhi. As Anton kind of brought up previously, that he does involve himself with Thu Nhi and being Huân Trường and everything. Our first group, my class being as your first group kind of back, how did you think about my group per se?
I don't know. Every group has its own characteristics, has its own personalities, has its own rewards and challenges. Your group specifically seemed to fall into like 2 or 3 subgroups, and there were the boys who messed around, and then there were the girls who were more cooperative, and that's from what I remember.
It was a good. The reason I brought it up was because me being within that group, even though it was my first year, I could see that too. Kind of like those 2 subgroups. Like it's like the boys. I saw 3 kind of. The boys, the girls, and then like not to be mean or anything, but there was like a third group there too. And it felt very cliquey, but somehow, some way, you were able to bring everyone together, which is something that I noticed. That was one of the first things that I noticed about you personally. How are you able to do that personally when you have a group so different in different ways and not really? How do you become that person to kind of bring different groups together?
I don't know. don't think I focus so much on becoming that person. I think it's, you focus on that work, then I think it's easier, it's simpler to see it that way. It's more achievable, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it helps when you acknowledge, like we talked about earlier, the humanity of everybody. Because like no matter the clique, no matter the groups, or no matter, I don't know, where you come from, like at the end of the day, we're still human. And if you can be present and pay attention to what each student brings as a human, then you can bring them together. Like for example, we all know pain. We all feel, right? And in this specific ministry, we're all Vietnamese Catholics, right? For Tingye, for those of you at home. So it's easier to touch on those things that are common. Right? And then when you recognize what's common, then it's easier to bring people in together as opposed to recognizing the differences. Because once you recognize the differences, then you start to recognize divisions where things can be split and divided, as opposed to what brings and unites people together.
I see. Just to fast forward things just a little bit more too, that's kind of going back to, that's where we first met and everything. I felt like I learned a lot from you, which is why I consider you my mentor, obviously. But one of the biggest things that I picked up from you, I haven't fully learned it yet, obviously, but another thing that I kind of realized, not only were you able to make things feel a little bit more like a community within our group, but another thing you had was patience. Just to touch a little bit about patience, how are you able to be so patient with us just in general? Because something that I kind of brought up within the first podcast too. Our group of boys weren't the best in terms of respect, and we are definitely a harder bunch to handle, especially considering the fact that the stuff that we do within the church is more volunteer based, and we're not really getting paid for anything that we do. So patience is definitely one thing that you really needed within our group. Between all the boys, we all have that mutual respect for you and Stev for the fact that you guys were patient with us. What were the life experiences, or why were you able to be so patient with us to begin with?
I think when you recognize the role that you're in, like as an instructor, teacher, mentor, when you work with a student, like, like from a student perspective, you can't learn when your teacher is impatient. And then from a teacher's perspective, you want your students to grow, and then you want them to develop. And I don't know, maybe I hit it really well, but I was like, I think you made Steph and I very impatient often. Not just it's a bad thing, but it's just like it took a lot more to work with your class. But with patience, it's just recognizing their needs first, and then once you can put yourself aside, like if between two parties, if you're trying to get to this point, you have to work with this side to get to that point. And if you're in a leadership position, and it's on you to set yourself aside, set your wants aside to get the needs of the student in this case to that point, right? It's kind of like if you're working in healthcare, if you're a doctor working with a patient, you're not going to force them to do anything. You're going to do what they can to heal them or to fix them and to cure them or what have you. And then if like impatience or being annoyed at someone has rarely been a positive element to driving that cause. So, but in terms of what I actually did to be patient with people, like I said earlier, it's easier or it helps to remember the humanity behind them. Like when I was 14, 15, 16, like what did I want to do? What made me rambunctious or what have you? And so when you recognize how you would be in that situation or what would make you like this, right? Then you see how you and that person are the same, right? So I saw myself in each of you, and I saw myself when I was being annoying, when I was being, I don't know, rebellious. Like when I see that, I'm like, I was like that. I get it. I know why I acted like that. And then when you see yourself in those positions, you're like, okay, you know, I've been there. And the last thing that I would want is for someone to blast me. Or maybe I did need that. And I delivered it sometimes to some of you when you guys were being extra annoying. But, you know, to understand different needs and different approaches, that helps with being, gosh, I wish I knew another word than patient, but to be more understanding, I think is the bigger term there. To understand your needs, your wants, and why you're acting like that. To also understand that I myself have been in that situation, made it a lot easier for me.
And understanding something that there's not really a time where everything just clicks. It's something that you can still always grow on. And I think that's something not that many people realize, or they may realize, but at the same time, it's like, if you don't do anything about it, that's not going to make you any better as a person if you don't act on your mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? Well done is better than well said, right? That's one of the American sayings, and it's better to do than to speak, right? And don't tell me about it, show me about it, you know, or show it to me. Gandhi was known, like Mahatma Gandhi, he was known for reading the gospel. And then somebody asked him, like, why did you never become a Christian? And he's like, I would have done it if I saw one, if I met someone, right? So he believed in the works that we did, but because he never met a Christian or a Catholic that actually acted it out, that's why he didn't convert. And so that's the challenge of this in Catholicism or Christianity. And then in your case, Brian, what we're talking about now is like to be understanding. We can think about it, we can write about it, we can talk about it. But every time you're impatient, that is an opportunity for you to develop your understanding. That's an opportunity for you to grow and continue to be more understanding of not only the person in front of you, but also the person within you. It's a concept where the more you understand yourself, the more you recognize your strengths, your weaknesses, your flaws, your skills, your talents, and your abilities. The more you see within yourself, the easier it is to see in other people. And then once you value yourself or you value others, it can work both ways. If I can see value in you, it'll be easier for me to see value in myself. If I see value in myself, it'll be easier to see it in you. And then once you get to that point, you see the legitimacy of how did I get to this point, or like how did I get to building these skills and talents. And you see the authenticity of it within yourself. And you can see when people are not truly talented or not truly skilled, and it's all superficial and all talk, right? And we've talked about this, like the difference between like true confidence and fake confidence. Like you can talk about it, you can walk a certain way, but then there's something a person will present himself or herself differently if they're truly confident. And true confidence can only come from true experiences. You can't fake it. Sure, people say you can fake it till you make it, but then I'd rather have someone who has made it without faking it.
Got it. Makes sense. That's an interesting point that you brought up about understanding. Just kind of going back a little bit more into your career path. Obviously, it's something that no one wants, but it did seem as if your career took a while for it to start actually come together. Like you said before, when you graduated at UCLA, you graduated with psychology. Going to Vietnam, did going to Vietnam even help you in terms of your career, in terms of what you wanted to do once you came back from the U.S.?
Probably not, if I had to think about it. If I had to think about it for this long. In terms of affecting my career choice, mean, at one point I wanted to be a sports psychologist. Actually, I wanted to be a performance enhancer because there's a field of study out there, and this is actually one of the things I do regret, because I was seeing someone at the time, and she asked me, "What are you going to do with this? Like, how is this going to help your career?" And I was like, you know what? I have no idea. I just thought it was something cool to study, and I still like exercise a lot of those concepts and those elements of being a better performer in my regular life. But in terms of career, it's like, I probably should have take that path. But she was like, yeah, well, how's this gonna help my career? Because I think around that time was when I was questioned on like, well, why am I dating? And then she wanted to start a family, and then I didn't realize it at the time I wasn't ready. And so that fell through. And then when I lived in Vietnam, in terms of career and the skill set that I was building, I think more indirectly than directly, because I had to constantly translate in my head before I spoke Vietnamese. And since I was an English teacher, I had to like work it through both ways. Translate English into Vietnamese and then retranslate it into English in a way for the students to understand. That's always like the biggest task. And if you can achieve that task, that's what's going to allow them to learn, I think. Indirectly, I think the biggest thing I learned was how to speak to people, how to work with people, how to speak in front of people. When you have a classroom of 30 plus, around 30 students who don't understand English, you gotta improvise. You gotta, like, the way you carry yourself is very important. And I think that contributed to my, I guess, command in front of people, how to talk in front of people. And also working with different administrators from different schoolings, because the way my English program was set up was that I had one learning center, and that learning center distributed my services to like different schools in the city. And to keep track of all that, like, tested my organization skills and time management. And so those are the technical skills that I learned. But in terms of career, like whether it made me believe that I was going to be a teacher or a doctor or a therapist or what have you, I don't think there was any direct like, oh, this is it.
What led you to finally decide to become an OT though? Because I know that was like, it was like very, not late, but like it just happened recently that you decided, you know what, I'm gonna be an OT, and then you just went through the whole thing, correct?
Yeah, for those of us who don't know what OT is, it's an occupational therapist, and our place in the healthcare world is very broad. So when I started at UCLA, I was like, okay, it's time to get my ish together. I think I'm gonna be a doctor, right? I wanted to be a doctor initially, and then a doctor on site. That at the hospital I was volunteering, I said, no, this is probably not the right idea. And we talked about it, and it seemed like one of the biggest pieces of wisdom that he ever gave me was the work that you end up doing isn't the work that you want to be doing. Right, so that always stuck with me. It's like, what do I always actually want to do? Like, instead of chasing titles, let's chase the problems that I want to solve, or the work that I want to do. Like, where do I actually want to invest my effort? And so being a doctor went out the window, and I thought about sports psychology because I enjoyed studying it. But then what it was the work that was requiring me, so I didn't really know. So that went out the window. And then Vietnam happened, and I was teaching over there. And teaching was fun and cool, but is that the type of work that I want to be doing for the rest of my life? And I was like, no, that's probably not it. And then when I came back to the States, I considered physical therapy because I like learning about the body, and at the time it seemed very stable, right? And as you get older, you do search for that stability in life. But as I studied and then volunteered, I recognized that PT wasn't for me, physical therapy wasn't for me, because it was very biomechanical, and I thought it has its own value and worth. But for myself, I like to see things more humanly, and then, like I said, the work that I'm doing, right, which led me to OT, which fortunately had a lot of the same prerequisites as PT. And the work that OTs do is to enable people to do things in whatever way that they found meaningful. So, for example, I was doing my clinicals at at a neuro rehabilitation site, so it can be anything from strokes to brain trauma to spinal cord injuries. I was actually placed in the spinal cord injury department, and then you don't understand how important little everyday things are until you can't do it. 10 for 10, all of our patients struggle with pooping and peeing.
Wow.
And you don't know how much it affects your life until you actually manually pee with a bag and a catheter every 4 hours. Like, you have to time it because you just don't go. And it's those little things, and then if you can help someone solve that problem, that's one less thing they worry about, and they can live a more meaningful life. They can do other things. Right. So the work of an OT, an occupational therapist, is to allow people to live a normal life or to live a meaningful life, again, in whatever capacity. And that just lined up with my own values, and I feel very fortunate to stumble it, because I did stumble into it. I didn't really know what OT was. I just thought it was like a more holistic version of PT.
I feel like no one really knows what OT is until like you're you know someone, or like it, like you said, kind of stumbles upon you and stuff like that.
Most people don't, and then especially when I try to explain to the Vietnamese community, you're like,
they don't know anything.
We don't even have a word for it.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, in Vietnam we do. They had a school start in like 2015 in Hanoi, and they call it Hoạt động to them, and it's activities therapist. And I'm like,
that's not really,
kind of, and I work with a lot of children with cerebral palsy over there, and they haven't really expanded what we can do, because in the States, OTs can be found in hospitals, physical disabilities, rehab sites, mental health, in schools, assisted living, like they call it the therapy lifespan, the entire lifespan. Yeah. Prenatal, neonatal, to death. There's a lot of room and a lot of areas that OTs can work in.
Is there an area that you really want to work in now? Now that, I mean, you are in rotations right now at the moment, but is there anything that gets your attention the most about OT at the moment?
Right now, there's a field called early intervention, which is basically before the mother gives birth, and then the first year or so. Those times are crucial, and then sometimes parents have a hard time navigating how to raise their child. And that's what early interventionists would do. Peds is fun too, because it's a lot of coordinated games.
What is it called again? Sorry,
Peds. Peds.
Pediatrics.
So with that, you basically make a game out of therapy, and then a skilled therapist will make it look like he's just playing games, or she's just having fun. But then once you ask them, what are they doing? They have a full analysis of what they're doing, how these games promote development in an atypically developed.
Can you kind of give an example?
Let's say, if a child is having trouble writing, let's say they push down too hard, okay?
Yes.
If I were to play tic-tac-toe with that child, and I place a piece of paper over a piece of foam, let's say, and the goal is to beat me at tic-tac-toe without punching a hole through the paper, that child will press softly, or softer than that would be. Outside looking in, you just think they're playing tic-tac-toe. The therapist's mind is like, okay, I have a piece of foam underneath the piece of paper as a physical cue for the child to not press too hard. And then that's how they develop proper handwriting ability. They know not to press too hard, and they know this is the amount of force, this is the amount of pressure it takes to write legibly. That's one small activity that you can do.
Interesting. So it seems as if there's a lot of I guess, because you said that you kind of regretted not being a sports psychologist. I feel like even just giving that example, there's a lot of psychology going behind it. So at least you're still in the field that you kind of want to work in.
There are elements. Yeah, there are definitely elements that I apply. There's something called deliberate practice in performance psychology, where you practice what you're not skilled at yet until you're skilled at it. Right. I know a lot of our listeners at home who play music, who play sports, they like doing the easy things because they feel successful.
Sure.
But then for you to actually improve your game, for you to become the next Roger Federer or the next Michael Jordan, you work on what you're not good at to cover up your holes, and then you get better. That's how you become elite.
Let's see. Just my last question to kind of wrap up this podcast, just because we're kind of hitting the time that we're aiming for, is: are you happy with where you are now? Because sorry to interrupt, but like, because it seems as if you explained that you aren't the most religious person, but you do practice a lot of spirituality and everything, and you are taking a road of where, for example, more of that slow lifestyle and everything. But with all these experiences and going kind of against the grain of what we're kind of accustomed to with certain things, are you still happy where you are now?
And that's like simple answer, yeah. You know, in-depth answer, it's like happiness for most of us is a choice, right? If you draw your attention to things that aren't going well in your life, if you're focusing on the discomfort or the unpleasantries, and that's where your mind is mostly, then that's all you're gonna see. Mm-hmm. Right? But then you get to control your attention, you can control your perspective. If for example, now recognize, all right, this is an opportunity, this is the first podcast I'm ever doing, that's pretty freaking cool, you know. My friend Matthew over there, I haven't seen in a long time, and to be able to work with him again is a pleasure. You know, Carlos is here, I make fun of him all the time, and to have the opportunity to tease him a little bit more, that's a great pleasure in my life, you know. And I think when you're, from my spiritual practices, I think joy finding should be considered a spiritual practice, because there are a lot of joys and a lot of little moments, like St. Therese said, like, do all things with love. You know, do even the smallest things with great love. Mm-hmm. And then when you do that and you find that things are better through your efforts, and you find what's good around you, because there is a lot of good around, right?
Even during bad times, you feel like?
Oh, 100%. That's when the good times shine the brightest. That's when those who are more, what's the word? I don't know. Those who are more likely to find the goodness will shine brighter, because people are going to want to be around those people. Others are going to want to be around that light and around that joy, as opposed to talking about the coronavirus all day. You know, I'd rather talk about, I don't know, other things at this point. You know, I think it's a little fatiguing.
It is. I have to agree with that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Anton. This is about the time where we're going to wrap things up. Thank you again, Anton, for your time. Hopefully, everyone is starting to understand a little bit more of what we're trying to get out of these podcasts, especially more about the real life experiences of these people that are within our community and everything, and how faith ties in with their own personal life. The reality is, not everyone will be as close to God as you think, but even though you might not be the most religious person, there are still things that you can gain out of religion, like the spirituality side and spiritual practices, to where you can still be a happier person. Thank you again, everyone, for your time. Hopefully you guys will catch us up on that third podcast. Peace.